Call now.
This Storm Watch sponsored by Rayovac. Thanks for joining us early on this Monday morning. Well, in just a moment, we'll talk about the flooding rains which have occurred since midnight in parts of Kentucky and Ohio. Also, the return of humidity and thunderstorms in New York City and Boston. Right now, though, the tropical update and the latest on Celia, which has been downgraded, by the way, to a tropical depression. That happened late yesterday. The maximum sustained winds now have therefore dropped below tropical storm force, sustained at 35 right now. The movement is still west at 8, and the pressure continues to rise, indicating the weakening 1,006 millibars. On to the satellite picture. Mexico, of course, right in here, Baja California, the remnants of Celia drifting west into colder water at the moment. No otherwise in the eastern Pacific, very little, if any, further development expected during the next 24 hours. The eastern Pacific is a favorable area for organization this time of the year. So are parts of the Gulf of Mexico, Bay of Campeche, Western Caribbean, the Atlantic Ocean waters right in here. The red zones, by the way, do not indicate that these are areas where conditions are favorable now. It just means that if something develops, this is the most likely area of organization or development. And you can see the favored tracks determined by storms that have developed in those regions during the last 110 years or so. Outside right now, a quiet morning in the Gulf, Caribbean. And east of the islands, we have a tropical wave moving to the west-northwest towards the islands. And right now, we are not expecting any significant, any rapid organization with that system. First close-up stop, Gulf of Mexico, cloud-free, most of the Caribbean too. There are, by the way, some very weak circulations, but there has been very little thunderstorm activity developing with those weak little cyclonic flows or weak disturbances, if you will. So we're not expecting any development in the western Caribbean, for instance. There's one near Cuba. Here's that tropical wave easing its way towards the islands. And the most significant effects will be thunderstorm activity and squally conditions. But in terms of tropical organization, right now we're not expecting anything. Although, of course, we will continue to watch that area very closely. It is a favored region for development this time of the year. An unfavorable area, the eastern Atlantic, just off the west coast of Africa. So we watch these tropical disturbances, tropical waves flare up over land, but as they hit the cooler water, they tend to die out, and the latest one is doing just that. So we have a quiet situation. Time to plan ahead to later in the season. So what would you need if and when a tropical storm or hurricane were to approach you? Well, you may need bottled water, non-perishable food, a flashlight, a battery-operated radio with extra batteries, a first aid kit. Remember to keep everything in one place. Should you have to evacuate, decide on where to go, when or if a warning or watch is issued, and develop an evacuation plan with various routes of escape. Back to the lower 48. We have powerful storms this morning in the Ohio Valley. Some storm activity, Pennsylvania, New York State. Severe weather beginning to break out in South Dakota, and flooding rain this morning in parts of Nevada and Arizona. Now those storms now rolling into Southern California with an impulse of moisture. We have a strong signature of the summer monsoon in the southwest. Let's go close up to the northeast. It was a great weekend in Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston with moderate humidity, comfortable temperatures. Now the winds have shifted. The humidity is moving back in. There's a heat advisory in effect for New York, as your heat indices will be right around 100 degrees before this day is finished. However, you may have a cooling thunderstorm late in the day too, as a weak disturbance in the atmosphere heads your direction. Right now, though, Boston, Merrimack Valley, down to the Hartford, Providence area, no rain. But parts of the Adirondacks, Green Mountain region, Catskill area, and Poconos down into Pennsylvania, you have showers and thunder showers, locally heavy rain already. Now, New York City, 75, 70 in Boston, upper 60s, Elkins, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Warm and muggy across the south with 83 in Miami and 84 in Dallas-Fort Worth. High pressure dominates, but as yesterday, there may be a few popcorn thunderstorms in the afternoon from the Mississippi River east. Texas and Oklahoma, your weather focus today will be the extreme heat and humidity. very few storms for you. Let's go to the Ohio Valley. Check on Doppler radar estimated precipitation. It's been very heavy since midnight. Butler County, Ohio, Gallatin County in Kentucky. The rains continue. The storms are redeveloping and moving over areas that have already had excessive rain. So stay with us. We'll have much more on this developing scenario coming up next.
The lightning and heavy rain that tore through parts of the southeast and Midwest last night may return to some areas later. More on potential storms next on Weather Center.
This program was sponsored by Rayovac Rechargeable.
It will be a day of high heat across much of the country. We also see severe thunderstorms now already popping up in Minnesota, and we do see the threat for strong to severe storms in the northeast. I'll have the details coming up in just a few moments. But first, for our tropical update, let's join Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist.
Well, thanks, Christine. We have a few interesting things. First, let's go to the Pacific and get the worries out of your mind about this tropical depression out here, Tropical Depression Celia, currently at 22.1 north and 119 west. It's now moving to the west at about 8 miles an hour. Winds are currently 35 miles an hour. No real threat to the Mexican coast anymore. Some lingering high surf will come into the coast. You surfers up here in Southern California, you're not going to get much out of this if you're hoping for big surf. We can see a couple of pictures on it here. You can see most of the thunderstorm activity with it virtually gone. It's going to die a very slow death. Here's a swirl out here in the visible imagery. You can see it a lot better, but not much of a worry to anybody but ships or boats that go through that area. And you can see elsewhere in the Pacific, very quiet, not much going on. We're not tracking anything. No developments expected the next 24 to 48 hours. We have a rather interesting change in the Atlantic Basin. You people in Florida have been watching those west winds all the time, and now in Miami you're getting a pretty good southeasterly breeze there, and with it comes the tropical air mass. That high pressure ridge at the surface, ridge of high pressure, is shifted to the north, more favorable for the tropical season. And associated with it, you can see this big blob of thunderstorm activity moving up over the southern Bahamas right toward the South Florida area. That should affect you the next 12 to 24 hours. Also, very unstable air mass over South Florida, so you should expect some very significant thunderstorm activity later in the day. Also out here in the Gulf of Mexico, extreme western Gulf of Mexico, a lot of shower activity there. That's associated with an upper level disturbance, and we can see that on the water vapor imagery here. You see a sort of a swirl to it here, circling in a counterclockwise direction here aloft, and that's producing some very cool air aloft, with the warm air at the surface is producing some unstable air there. Also out in the Atlantic, we have a very broad area, very, very unstable air. Look at all these showers heading right over the northern islands here and toward Puerto Rico. The interesting thing with this is that we've got some fairly strong winds above the ground at about 2,000 or 3,000 feet. And with these thunderstorms, those strong winds of about 30 or 40 miles an hour are going to mix down to the ground. So you could expect some very gusty winds here the next 12 hours as those storms move through. Out into the Atlantic, you can see that we're not looking at anything very organized. Most of it is ill-organized and nothing really to talk about other than heavy thunderstorm activity. We do have a very interesting big swirl of low pressure here in what we call the stratocumulus, or the low clouds, but that is not expected to do much at all the next 24 hours. Well, it's getting closer and closer to the peak of the hurricane season. You can see here are our numbers, July 21st to 30th. A lot more dots out here on the map, and they extend farther to the east, but look at all of them in the Gulf as well. Now's the time to prepare, so don't wait around until it's too late to prepare. Prepare now while it's still quiet. Now, what we're going to be talking about, if and when we are unlucky enough to get a system out there, is the Saffir-Simpson Tropical Cyclone Intensity Scale, and it ranges from Category 1 to 5. Keep in mind that the damage associated with each of these is quite different. The other thing to remember is a Category 2 or 3 or 1, for example, it gives different damage depending on where it hits, and we will give you the latest information on that as we go along. Well, let's get back to Christine and see what weather's going on across the country.
All right, thank you very much. And what you can expect today ahead of our cold front is a threat for severe weather moving through Minnesota. We already have severe thunderstorm warnings in effect, affecting areas like Walnut Grove and Sleepy Eye, Minnesota. That will be pressing toward Minneapolis by later on today. Also later on, we will see more numerous thunderstorms here in the southeast. Details next.
Next on Weather Center, the latest on dangerously hot weather in many areas and thunderstorms that threaten others. A full report right after your local forecast.
Mr. Sandman. Remember when a quarter bought you 3 songs on the jukebox? And where you had the most fun hanging out with your friends?
Young love, first love.
Now relive those malt chop memories with 36 of the most romantic songs to ever come out of a jukebox.
Since I met you, baby, 16 candles, come with me.
Ink formula gets the red out, plus more. This computer image of an irritated eye simulates how advanced relief Visine spreads.
Was fine. Caribbean, similar. We've got some shower activity moving over the islands here, and especially up over Puerto Rico into Hispaniola. A lot of moisture here coming out of the southeast in the low-level trade winds here out of the southeast. Some very brisk winds just to the north of it this afternoon on the order of 25, 30 miles an hour here. The extreme western Caribbean Sea, still very nice other than a few showers right along the coastal zone there. We've been looking at a little area out in here that is sort of interesting, but not really any development there either. We can get a little better view of it as we go out into the central Atlantic Ocean, and you can see linear shower activity all oriented the same way, generally towards South Florida, but nothing in the way of development. We have some interesting weather here where we have a surface low pressure trough that's been in here the last couple of days, and it's we need to watch that, because as we go out into the extreme eastern Atlantic Ocean, we see that we have a lot of thunderstorm activity, and embedded in this low-level circulation here, we have another very large spiral circulation of stratocumulus clouds. This is starting to interact with this low cloud out here, and we'll have to keep an eye on it. This is sort of harmless by itself because there's no thunderstorms with it, but the interaction of the two may in fact brew something up here in the next few days. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Elsewhere here off the coast of Africa, another tropical wave moving onto the coast here. Thunderstorms are dissipating rather quickly from it, which is good news, but that wave will continue to push off to the west. Upper level wind-wise, you can see easterly winds aloft, very, very favorable conditions for tropical development, and you can see that upper level disturbance here in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea producing all that weather over Florida this afternoon. Well, in the eastern Pacific, we still have tropical depression Celia, 22.4 north, 120.2 west. It's moving about 10 miles an hour to the west, well away from land, 35-mile-an-hour winds. And if we look at what it looks like on the infrared imagery, it's rather pathetic looking. You see just a little low cloud swirl, that's all that's left of it. Still some seas kicking up in there, about 5 to 10 knots of wind off to the north, and about 5 to 10 foot seas in the northeastern quadrant. So a little bit of a concern for mariners, but it's on its deathbed. It's not going to come back, moving off into the stratocumulus and the colder water. So we're in great shape there. Now farther to the southeast, we have a couple of clusters of very big clouds. This one down here, and another one over here off the Yucatan Peninsula, moving off to the west. No development expected in either one of those, but we'll keep an eye on them for you. So we're in pretty good shape in the tropics, but notice all the thunderstorms. It's up on the rise here into the tropical season, so be prepared at all times. Well, let's go back to Bill and see what he's got brewing in the severe weather around the country.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. Again, our severe threat pretty high, fairly widespread today, too. In the Midwest, also around the Alabama area, Birmingham getting peppered, especially on the southwestern and eastern side of town. Likewise, portions of the Hudson Valley and the Connecticut Valley of the Northeast. In addition, tornado watches in Minnesota, northern Becker, northern Clearwater counties of Minnesota under a tornado warning as we speak. For these cells right in here, watch out Park Rapids. Hail and high wind along with very heavy rain, very likely a tornado, a possibility. Everything dropping southeasterly. Minneapolis catching a break. Chicago, you're not quite so lucky though. Travelers anywhere from about Lake Cook Road down into Winnetka, southward running down all the way actually to about Harvey and Chicago Heights getting hit pretty hard. Just got a warning in for the Litchfield County area, so watch out Torrington in Connecticut. This storm will be on top of you within 10 minutes. Again, with hail and high wind and briefly very, very heavy rain. Take it easy on Route 7 and also Interstate 91 in the Hartford area over the next hour.
Next on Weather Center, the latest on dangerously hot weather in many areas and thunderstorms that threaten others. A full report right after your local forecast.
If you're ready for your own home and money is tight, you're probably asking yourself questions like,
This is Storm Watch. I'm Dave Schwartz. So glad you tuned in here. It's 10 minutes now before the hour. This is your tropical update. We start off here and end up with severe weather over the lower 48. Checking on a satellite image that takes us back through last week of the Atlantic Basin. And there are a couple of interesting things to note. Some active weather along the intertropical convergence zone. Tropical waves making their way into the eastern Caribbean, now 2 of them. Meanwhile, a lot of clouds over the southeast in association with moisture that's beginning to move in from the tropics. And that'll help keep those deadly fires away from Florida. Something else to notice too, north of this line where we find all these little tropical waves are lower clouds, gray clouds on this image, swirling around that are kind of following along with these waves down in here. Now, they're not coming, nothing is coming of any of that stuff, but I want you to keep an eye on this one. Can you see that? You see those clouds? There we go. Right into Florida right now. And this is what the Florida radar looks like. Check it out, radar in Florida. Here we go. And there you have it. Showers coming in from the east, tropical moisture, perhaps remnants of thunderstorms over Cuba and outflow boundaries, but they're kept alive by this tropical wave that is moving into South Florida tonight. So look for some heavy downpours here in the Keys, the upper Keys in particular, and up toward Miami. We've got some showers up here in Broward County. So it looks like a showery night here in Florida, thanks to one of these tropical waves. Now, further south, an area of showers here, another one there, another one there, another one here, and everything else, well, for the most part, is over land. So we've gone over the clouds and showers here in Florida, and we could see that blow up of thunderstorms here in Cuba, the outflow of which is headed towards Florida Keys here tonight. There's an upper level low that sits over here that's helping to draw this moisture westward, as opposed to how everything up here is going west to east over southeastern Virginia. This is going from east to west. So we're finally broken out of that pattern here in Florida. I'm glad to say, warm, humid, no more fires. Now, as we head further out into the Caribbean, another tropical wave here, and another tropical wave here is made for some very heavy rain here in the windward and especially the leeward islands here today. Here in Puerto Rico, we're kind of in the middle, but as this tropical wave heads west, there'll be some more showers for you on Tuesday afternoon, certainly. And here comes that next tropical wave. So some more moisture is going to be headed toward Florida the next several days. No tropical organization, no storm formation is expected, just a lot of moist air coming in. Then a break of the action, then we head out into the central Atlantic where there have been these little tropical disturbances now kind of hanging around, making their way westward at about 15 to 20 miles an hour. Nothing is formed yet. It's still fairly early in the hurricane season. And there we have it. By the way, this is one of those little swirls. Yeah, I wanted to show you the satellite picture. While your eye is generally drawn down here, notice this swirl right in here. See that? Going that way? That's one of those swirls that's moving into Florida. And there's another one, I think, moving off the coast right now, maybe in here somewhere, lost in there. So there we have it, our tropical update here in the Atlantic Ocean, showing the upper level winds following nicely with our surface features in here, which indicates that some kind of tropical formation is going to occur. Here, everything's moving east to west at all levels of the atmosphere, and that's a situation that's conducive to tropical storm formation. Then the upper level low that's situated right here, drawing that moisture into Florida, parts of Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Last off, the Pacific Ocean for our last check-in on Tropical Depression Celia. Was a tropical storm. Now it is merely a swirl of low clouds harmlessly off the coast of Baja California. And further south, near the intertropical convergence zone, some unstable, some showery weather, no organization. That's your tropical update. Now we head stateside. Stateside to an area of the country that has produced some thunderstorms that have had winds gusting at 100 miles an hour in southeastern Wisconsin. This is the cluster. And that's making a beeline for Detroit. Damaging winds, automatic. Here in the next 15 to 20 minutes, here in the western suburbs of Detroit. Looks like the south side will have the worst of it between Toledo and Detroit. Guaranteed damaging winds. If your car is parked precariously, or you have some, let's say some patio furniture outside, go outside right now and take it in here in Toledo. Otherwise, it might just end up down the street. More severe weather is breaking out here in Wisconsin in association with a cold front. Where that cold front ends up and where the storms will be tomorrow is the focus of Weather Center.
As a dangerous heat wave grips the U.S., will thunderstorms break?